Okay, good morning to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone. We're going to get started with our meditation this morning. And then afterwards, I'm going to teach you guys what is Kamma and how does it affect me. We're going to take our mid-morning break. And then when we come back, I'm going to teach you what is merit and then continued support on the path to enlightenment, as well as how to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life. After our lunch break, then I'll teach you loving kindness meditation. So if you'd like to join for meditation, I know you guys have all been meditating for quite a while with me, at least this week. So I'm going to do the chanting to ease us into the meditation, but then I'm not going to give any guidance at all. This way you guys can get used to meditating without any guidance. And then afterwards, when we're done meditating, we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Otang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Iti Piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakatoro Kavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusranang Oto Bhagavati สัมมาสัมพุทโธมหากวาโพตังมหากวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหากวัตตาธัมโมดามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหากวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสตาตาวามนุสนังโหโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here. Good morning. Welcome to everyone online as well. Today's topic is what is Kamma and how does it affect me? I'm going to help you guys to understand this natural law because when we talk about awakening to enlightenment, this is what you're actually awakening to is this natural law. But before I do, since you guys have been meditating throughout the course, I would like to just pause and see if you guys have any questions on meditation. So if there's anything related to meditation or your meditation practice that you would like to ask questions about, now's a good time. You guys have any questions on your meditation? No? Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is move into this topic of what is Kamma and how does it affect me? And as we go, you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions that you like, just like always. Since we have people joining us online, if you guys could use the microphones, we have microphones around that you guys can use for asking questions. Then we'll be able to hear you here and they'll be able to hear you online as well. So to understand this natural law is to awaken to enlightenment. The Buddha is teaching you and helping you to cultivate wisdom about this natural law. Because when you're out in the world making decisions without wisdom of this natural law, you're going to inadvertently make unwise decisions and it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So when you're awakening to enlightenment, you're cultivating wisdom of this natural law so you can understand wise decision making that leads to wholesome results in your life. Sometimes what people think is what they experience in day-to-day life is either good luck or bad luck. They think that it's maybe destiny or fate, or some people think that there's a being like God that is controlling us, or some people like to blame things that they experience on other people. And as long as you're doing this, you're never going to be able to experience a peaceful and joyful mental state of enlightenment and enjoy wholesome things happening in your life because in those situations, you're stuck. If it's good luck and bad luck that is the reason why you experience what you experience, you can't change that. Or if it's fate or destiny, you can't change that. Or if it's God that's controlling you, you can't change that. Or if it's other people that are causing what you experience in life, you can't change that either. So that is a very defeating way to look at the world is that what you're experiencing is because of other things. But when you come to understand the natural law of Kamma, you can see that everything you experience is a result of decisions that you're making. Therefore, it's very empowering because if there's anything that you don't particularly care for in your life, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But if it's everybody else or any of these other things that is causing what you experience in life, then you're stuck. There's nothing you can do to improve your life. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to see this cause and effect or this action and result. That's what the natural law of karma is. It's a natural law that's affecting you, whether you're aware of it or not. And when you lack wisdom in this natural law, you'll tend to go out into the world thinking you have all the best intentions in the world. But in reality, you go out into the world and you make decisions that are oftentimes unwise. And then when you experience unwholesome results coming back, you might immediately start blaming other people for that. But instead, you can understand this natural law that it's this cause and effect or this action and result. It's the results of your decisions. That's what this natural law is. Now, some people refer to this as karma. You might have heard that before. That's from the Sanskrit version, the different language. The original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language. So people who study his original teachings will typically use this word karma, where if it translated to just one English word, I would use that because it'd be easier for everyone to understand. But it doesn't translate to just one English word, so I still need to use this word karma. What it means is cause and effect or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. When you make decisions wisely, it's going to produce wholesome results or wholesome karma. And when you make decisions unwisely, it's going to produce unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. Every being is being affected by this, whether they're aware of it or not. You don't have to be aware of this natural law in order for it to affect you. You will experience the effects of this, and you have been experiencing the effects of this all throughout your life. It's just like the natural law of gravity. We don't need to be aware of it in order for it to affect us. When we were 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, it still affected us whether we were aware of it or not. When we cultivated wisdom of that natural law, that's where we started making different decisions and we started experiencing different results. Where when we were a young child, we fell down, we hurt ourselves, we broke our toys, we had all kinds of difficulties with that natural law. But through cultivating wisdom of that natural law, now we can make wise decisions. We can climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, we can get on airplanes, fly all over the world because we fully awoke. We have complete wisdom of this natural law of gravity. So you need to do the same thing with the natural law of karma. If your mind experiences anger or frustration or sadness or irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, this is what the unenlightened mind experiences. That means you haven't yet cultivated wisdom of this natural law. Once you fully understand this natural law and you develop your mind towards training the mind, you won't experience those discontent feelings anymore. That's how you'll know that your mind is enlightened because it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You won't have any discontentedness whatsoever. So the Buddha isn't teaching you based in belief. So you would never be interested in believing this natural law. You would like to learn it. You would like to investigate it and examine it. You would like to reflect on it to independently verify it. And then you'd like to practice it to be able to see the truth. So I'm going to help you guys get started with that today. So there's no being or entity that oversees this natural law and kind of administers this natural law. That's kind of what some people think. But instead, it's because of your own intentions, speech, and actions that you're going to experience the results. For example, if you're polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, that's what you're putting out. That tends to be what comes back to you. Where when you're impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, that's what's coming back to you. But you need to be able to understand much deeper than that in order to awaken to enlightenment. But essentially, you can see that cause and effect. The natural law of karma is not a system of punishments and rewards. Sometimes people think that's the case, or they think it's kind of like some kind of mystical or magical thing, or like a dark cloud following you around, or maybe who's at fault or who's to blame. That's not what the natural law of karma is. The way you can think about it is like a sequence of events, right? And if you're not understanding that everything you experience is a result of your decisions, take a moment and think about your hairstyle right now. Who chose that, right? You chose that hairstyle, right? Or think about where you're sitting right now. Who chose that? That's you that chose that, right? Who chose the clothing that you're wearing right now? You chose that. Who chose whether or not you ate breakfast this morning or not? You chose that. Who chose where you live? You chose that, right? Every single thing in your life is a choice that you're making. So you can see that it's not any being that's overseeing this natural law or what you're experiencing. It's not good luck or bad luck. It's not destiny or fate. It's none of these kinds of things. Everything you're experiencing is based in your own free will. You have your own free will. And as you make decisions, either wisely or unwisely, you're going to experience the results of those coming back to you. But it's not about punishment and rewards. It's not about who's at fault or who's to blame or anything mystical or magical. Sometimes I've heard people think that the natural law of Kamma is like you're making deposits into a bank account. And then if you have enough positive balance, you can start making withdrawals out of this bank account. This isn't actually true, right? You're going to experience unwholesome results when you're making unwise decisions. So just as a summary, you can think of the natural law of Kamma as cause and effect or action and result, the results of your decisions. It's your life, it's your decisions, and it's your results. That's what the natural law of Kamma is. Now, in terms of the words of the Buddha on the natural law of Kamma, we could say that everything that he taught in one way or another is coming back to the natural law of Kamma. In the book series that I share, which is 13 books, there's one book that's dedicated to the natural law of Kamma. But you could really say the entire book series is dedicated to the natural law of Kamma because everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. But these are just two teachings about the natural law of Kamma that you need to understand at this particular point in order to be able to illustrate two important aspects of this natural law. The first one, the Buddha says, beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. What he's saying is only you can produce Kamma for yourself. Sometimes I hear people say, oh, don't rub your bad Kamma off on me, or don't rub your unwholesome Kamma off on me, or hey, I'm going to give you some good Kamma, or I'm going to give you some wholesome Kamma. It's not possible. What you're experiencing is the results of your decisions. Nobody else can create Kamma for you. It's just not possible. And you can see that here with the Buddha. He's sharing with you that you are the one who's making decisions and you are the one who's going to experience the results of those decisions. Then he says, the result of Kamma, I say, is threefold: to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. What he's saying here is that you can't run and hide from your Kamma. Whatever decisions you make, either wisely or unwisely, you are going to experience the results of those. And as I mentioned, nothing in the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief. Even the cycle of rebirth and the fact that you have multiple lives, that's not to be believed either. You can actually independently verify the cycle of rebirth. You may or may not have the wisdom of how to do that right now, but you can ultimately cultivate that wisdom. So if you understand that you are the one who's creating your Kamma, either wholesome or unwholesome, and then you can't run and hide from that, the very next thing that your mind might come to is, well, let me learn as much about this as possible so that I can make wise decisions and experience wholesome results in the world. So that's what I'm going to explain to you, is the four types of Kamma. There's wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma. There's old Kamma and there's new Kamma. So wholesome Kamma are any decisions that you make that are harmless, where you're not harming others. When you're making decisions that are harmless, you will experience wholesome results or wholesome Kamma. But when you're making harmful decisions, you're going to experience unwholesome Kamma, where you're causing harm to others. Now, if you've heard me share the Four Noble Truths and the three poisons, you know that you can't cause other people discontentedness. You're causing your own discontentedness, and other people are causing their own discontentedness. You can't cause other people to be angry or sad or frustrated or irritated. It's just not possible. But you can cause people harm. When you're causing harm to someone's physical body, to their material possessions, to their reputation, or something of that nature. That's causing harm to others. And whenever you cause harm, this harm is going to come back to you. But when you make harmless decisions, then you will experience wholesome results. So for example, right now, you're just sitting in one spot. You're not causing any harm. You're making a harmless decision. You're just sitting in one spot. And that's why there's no harm that's coming to you. Where if you were to poke the person in the, next to you in the eyes, if you started doing that, there's going to be some harm that comes to you, right? Because you're now harming another being. They're probably going to swat your hand away. You might get punched. Who knows what might happen, right? So that's why where if you're making harmful decisions, you're going to experience unwholesome results. So you can see this natural law right in front of you day by day. Then there's something called old Kamma and new Kamma. What old Kamma is any decisions that you've made in the past that you're experiencing the results of now in the present moment. Any decisions you make now in the present moment that you experience in the future, that's new Kamma. So let me give you an example of this. Let's just say I was filling out a government tax form to report my taxes to the government. And let's just say 3 years ago, when I filled out this tax form, I lied. And now, 3 years later, I get a notice in the mail that says, you owe us $3,000. There's $1,000 for the initial amount that you owe, $1,000 penalty, and $1,000 interest. Now you owe me $3,000. This is a notice that you're getting from the government. This is old, unwholesome Kamma. Because you lied in the past 3 years ago, you're now experiencing the Kamma now, that it's old, unwholesome Kamma. But now in the present moment, you have choices to make. What are you going to do? Because in the present moment, you're going to be producing new Kamma. And if you didn't know these teachings, you might rip up that letter and throw it away. Or you might call up the government and start yelling and hollering and shouting at them. Or you might write them a nasty letter and tell them how they're so wrong and you're so right and all this other kind of stuff. And in that situation, you're going to be making new, unwholesome Kamma. But if in the present moment you understand these teachings and you can't run and hide from your unwholesome Kamma, and what you would like to do is extinguish your unwholesome Kamma, then you would know that that would be the last thing you're interested in doing, is ripping up this letter or calling up the government or being nasty or bitter to them. Instead, you might call them up, you might write them a letter, apologize for this oversight, let them know that you would like to take care of this. If you're being polite, kind, friendly, respectful, now you're creating new wholesome Kamma. And now what might end up happening is they might say, hey, you know what? We understand accidents happen. You know what? We're going to remove the penalty. We're going to remove the interest. You just owe us the $1,000. Just pay us the $1,000. And then you might say, you know, I'd really like to pay you that $1,000, but I just don't have it. I'm so sorry. And you might be speaking polite and kind and friendly with them. And now they say, you know what? How about we work out a payment plan? What if you pay us $50 a month or $100 a month or something like this? And now, because of your wise decisions, you're experiencing new wholesome Kamma. That wholesome things are happening for you. You're now able to extinguish this unwholesome Kamma that has come back to you, that is old, unwholesome Kamma. Because in the present moment, you're making new decisions that's producing new wholesome Kamma, right? So this is wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma, and then old Kamma and new Kamma. The way that you create unwholesome Kamma is connected to something that we talked about yesterday. We discussed the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires. Whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, this is when you're going to produce unwholesome Kamma. So just a recap for some of you guys that were here yesterday and those of you guys that weren't here, what craving is, this is the mind's longing and yearning. This is chasing after the objects of your affection, your selfish desires, wanting things to be permanently pleasing for yourself. Whenever you're making decisions through those longing and yearning, that's going to produce unwholesome Kamma because it's coming from a place of selfishness. Or if you have anger, hatred, or bitterness or hostility in your mind, whenever you're making decisions through that, that's going to produce unwholesome results for you or unwholesome Kamma. And whenever you're making decisions through your lack of wisdom or your unknowing of true reality where you don't understand these natural laws, that's going to produce unwholesome results for you as well. And you can independently verify this. Look at situations where you've made decisions through craving, anger, or ignorance, and you can see that it's produced unwholesome results for you. Maybe you've experienced broken relationships. Maybe you lost a job and you were fired in a job or some other thing. Maybe you were even arrested or went to jail or who knows what might have happened. But whenever you make decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, you will produce unwholesome Kamma. Even if there's the slightest little bit of this, even the slightest trace in your decision making, it will produce unwholesome Kamma. But then in terms of producing wholesome Kamma, this is also connected to something that we talked about yesterday, which is the wholesome roots of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Generosity is where you're giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources, without any expectation of anything in return, that's always going to produce wholesome karma, because it's just the opposite of craving, desire, attachment, where you're giving and sharing with others. You're practicing generosity. Then, when you practice loving kindness, this is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, active goodwill towards others. Whenever you're practicing that, it's going to produce wholesome karma or wholesome results for you. And when you're making decisions based in wisdom of these teachings, things like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Five Precepts, the Natural Law of Kamma, things of this nature, it's going to produce wholesome karma or wholesome results for you. So this is how you produce wholesome karma, is through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys have about what I've shared so far. And then I'm going to go deeper into this and help you understand how to extinguish all your unwholesome karma so you can get to the point where you're only experiencing wholesome karma. You have a question?
Thank you, Teacher David. I had like question one I had was, I think I've discussed this with you before, but maybe you can expand on a little more. There are we're saying here that the karma is produced by your own decisions and your choices, but there seems to be world events which are kind of outside your understanding of the world, right? Or your maybe outside your control of how what you are doing. And even in the Buddha's case, when some of the Brahmins and came and told the king that your son is going to be a leader, that was like something was going to happen in the future. And how if are we saying that if Gautam Buddha had made different decisions, then this that would not have happened? Because it seems like there are a lot of these factors are kind of out of your control, and something just seemed to happen without your having any direct control over it. Like you're doing a great job in a company, the company is doing for some time doing well, and suddenly they're not doing well, and they fire you because not because of what your job that you have done, but something happened, and then the stock market crashed or COVID happened or something like that, right? And these things that affect your job more than what your decisions have actually affected that. How do we explain those things?
Okay, it's all karma. So when the fortune teller was telling the Buddha's father that your son is going to be a great spiritual leader, that individual was being able to see a point in time, but it's still cause and effect all the way to that situation. So fortune tellers are just looking at a certain point in time and they're explaining what may or may not be happening at that particular time. But that's not what the Buddha taught, is to be worried about the future or look at consulting fortune tellers. Sometimes people are so worried about the future that they spend time doing those kinds of things. The Buddha is teaching you to get to peace and joy now in the present moment. And we don't have to know what's going to happen in the future in order to get to peace and joy in the present moment. But it's still cause and effect that led to that particular result of Gotama or Siddhartha Gautama becoming the Buddha. And then in terms of you're working for a company and then they have a financial difficulty and they need to lay everybody off or they go out of business, this is still your karma. You didn't choose to uh, cause the financial difficulty for the company, but it was your choice to work for that company. And now your karma is collective karma amongst all those individuals at the company. While all those individuals are making individual decisions, when they make individual decisions and the company struggles financially, now you're part of that, and now you're getting laid off or you're getting fired because the company's going out of business. It's still cause and effect. It's still a sequence of events. Mhm. Yes, sir. We have another mic right here if you'd like to use that. You just press the button and turn it on, and we'll be able to hear you.
I have a question about when you describe unwholesome karma
Hmm.
and how a person can harm the other person. I think maybe I misunderstood, but you specified that it has to be something physical. Can it also be like verbal or emotional, where something like another person can harm the other person, or is it that for emotional, it's all under the control of the other person?
Yeah, you're in control of your own emotions. With an unenlightened mind, somebody's mind will be shaken up and it'll be affected by outside experiences, but that is still being caused by internally within one's own mind. It's not the outside world. So you can't harm somebody's emotions. So, like if somebody yelled and hollered and screamed at me right now, I would just smile. It wouldn't affect the mind whatsoever. But if somebody uh, had a craving or a desire for everybody to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to them, when somebody yelled at them, they would be upset and they would be frustrated. But it's their own mind because they have a craving for permanence, wanting everybody to treat them in a certain way. But when you get to a point where you understand that that's not possible and you've eliminated those cravings, there's nothing anybody can do to shake up your mind. You're welcome. It's already on.
Is it
Mhm.
possible for good,
No, if you're making a decision, it's either going to produce wholesome karma or unwholesome karma. So if you're making decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, it will only ever produce wholesome karma. And then if you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it will always produce unwholesome karma. And the karma that we're talking about is it's the results of our decisions. It's what we experience on a day-to-day basis in terms of like how much financial wealth you have or how many friends you have or the relationships you have around you, different things like this. This is all the results of your decisions, and that can't be transformed once you're experiencing a certain type of karma. It's not going to be changed. You can extinguish your unwholesome karma and make and create more and more wholesome karma. But once you've made a decision that produces wholesome karma, it can't change into unwholesome karma from that point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yep.
So my question relates to merit, and when that fine line. When I was in Thailand, I noticed a lot of merit that was almost ritualistic, and you teach that the Buddha didn't teach rituals. So help me understand the line when merit is wholesome and good karma as opposed to a ritual.
Okay, we're going to talk about that next. Can we talk about that
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
next
for
topic?
sure.
Just bring that up when we get to the next topic after
Okay.
our break. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's all the questions for now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you guys understand how to eliminate your unwholesome karma, because that's the whole path to enlightenment. Because as long as you have all these unwholesome things coming back to you, how can you experience peace and joy for the rest of your life? That's what the Buddha is teaching you how to do, is get to a point where your mind's completely peaceful and joyful. But if you're out there being bitter and harsh and hostile to the people around you, then that's what's going to be coming back to you, is bitterness, hostility, and harshness. And how can you get to a peaceful and joyful mental state in that situation? So what you would like to be able to do is extinguish your unwholesome karma. So it's the Eightfold Path, which I taught a couple of days ago, that is going to help you to extinguish your unwholesome karma. When you practice the Eightfold Path and bring your practice up to that level, and then you do that for an extended period of time, you're going to be making decisions differently than you do right now. And over a consistent long-term period of time, that's what's going to extinguish your unwholesome karma. So if you remember, there's right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. You're going to need to know this teaching inside and out. You're going to need to commit it to your memory so that you can actually practice it on a day-to-day basis. If you don't know these teachings, you wouldn't be able to extinguish your unwholesome karma. So when someone asks you, say, hey, what is right speech? You're going to need to know, well, that is eliminating lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. And you're going to need to know what each one of those things are. And then in more detail, it's practicing the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, speaking at the proper time. What you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. And you're going to need to know what each one of those things are and actually practicing it on a day-to-day basis. And each one of these factors of the Eightfold Path, you're going to need to know what those are and practice them closely. And then as you're practicing them for an extended long-term period, over time, as all your old unwholesome karma is coming back to you, you're now going to be extinguishing that, like with the notice from the government that I mentioned, like a tax notice that you've lied or that you made an error and that now you need to pay a certain amount of money. You're going to need to extinguish that, right? So the way that I think about this is that all throughout our life in the unenlightened state, we're putting mud into our garden hose, right? You're putting all this mud into the garden hose. And what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're hooking your hose up to a faucet. And if you open up the faucet and get some clean water coming through the garden hose, you're going to start flushing this garden hose out. Well, if you're meditating once a month, once a week, if you're listening to a talk like this once every 6 months, if you're doing those kinds of things, you got like one drip of water coming through your garden hose every so often. You're not going to be able to clean out this garden hose in this lifetime. It's just not going to happen. But if you come to talks like this regularly, maybe you're consistently studying, maybe week by week, you're learning with a teacher, maybe you're reading books, maybe you're meditating every single day. Now you've got more and more water coming through this garden hose. You've opened up the faucet. And now, with all that clean water going into the garden hose, it's going to spit mud for a while. Your family and your friends and people like this, they're going to talk to you in unkind ways for a while because that's the way you've been talking to them. You're going to have to experience this mud coming out of the garden hose. But if you put more and more clean water into this garden hose, meaning you clean up your moral conduct, for example, then over time, as this hose is spitting mud, eventually you're going to see some clean water coming out of that garden hose. Then it's going to spit some more mud. Then there's going to be some clean water. Then there's going to be some more mud. But then it's going to be clean water, clean water, clean water. Then it's going to be a little bit of mud. But then it's going to be clean water, clean water, clean water, clean water. And eventually you'll flush out all of this mud. And that's through putting wise decisions into your life. So I'll give you an example of this from my own life. So when I grew up in a very hostile and bitter environment. I learned to yell and holler and scream at people if they didn't do what you wanted. And this is how I grew up. So as I was growing up and I was functioning as an adult, of course, I was polite and respectful to a certain degree. But the people who were closest to me, like my wife, I would sometimes be bitter and harsh and hostile to her. And I was doing that for a very long period of time. But then after about 11 years of being married to my wife, I decided I was tired of all of this. I was tired of the stress and anxiety and the type of life that we had. And I started doing work to be able to transform my own mind. And I started being loving and kind with my wife. I started practicing right speech and right action and all these other teachings. And I started to be loving and warm and gentle with her. But she wasn't warm and gentle with me. She was angry at me for the things that I had done in the past. So for about a year and a half, I had to deal with all this anger and hostility coming back to me. But when she was being bitter and harsh and hostile to me in the past, I would be bitter and harsh and hostile to her right back. But now I changed. And excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. So now I changed. I started doing things differently. When she was being bitter, harsh, and hostile to me, I was being loving and kind. And oftentimes what I would do when she would be bitter and harsh and hostile to me is I would just walk away, right? There's no reason to sit there and just take that, right? There's no reason for me to do that. She could see that in the past she would be bitter, harsh, and hostile, and I would be bitter, harsh, and hostile right back. But now she saw something different, that when she was being bitter, harsh, and hostile, her husband would just calmly walk away, right? And I did that for a very long period of time. Then I started gaining more control over my mind. And when she was being bitter, harsh, and hostile to me and telling me about all the things that I did in the past that were so unwise, I was like, yep, you're right. I sure did. I was a terrible husband. You were right. I was a terrible husband. You're right. And I would just, agree with her because I needed to get all of that anger out of her. And then eventually she would get it all out and I would say, thank you, dear. And I would why her and I'd walk away, right? So over time, about a year and a half of her yelling and hollering and screaming at different times, you could see initially it was quite a lot, but then it started tapering off more and more and more and more and more. And after about a year and a half, which was kind of 6 years ago, there was no bitterness. There was no hostility. She had gotten it all out. And she could see that I was being loving and kind to her, that it was her that was angry, that it was her that needed to transform her mind. Because I'd already done that. I wasn't being bitter and harsh and hostile to her anymore. I was only being loving and kind and warm and gentle. So now in 6 years, we haven't had any arguments. We haven't been upset with each other. We've been angry with each other. Sure, we've disagreed with certain things, but we sit down and talk about it now. Where in the past, it was like a fight to death. When she had a different opinion than me, we both had to fight and argue and yell at each other and try to convince each other to agree with us. But when we understood these teachings, we didn't need to do that anymore. We could just be loving and kind and just recognize she has one opinion, I have a different opinion, and that's okay. That's normal, that is just impermanence. But when we craved that permanence, wanting her to agree with me or me to agree with her. It was like two animals fighting towards death. So you can get to a point where you extinguish all your unwholesome karma. And you're going to need to do this in your relationships, because there's certain relationships you have right now that aren't really working out for you. And maybe you're not committed to those relationships and you need to just move on from them, but you're holding on. You need to decide to let go of those relationships and move on. You don't need to tell the person, you don't need to explain anything to them. But whenever you guys are together, it just doesn't go very well. And you need to just choose to let go and move on. Then there's a second category of relationships, people that you're more committed to, that you would like to see this relationship improve. Maybe your life partner, maybe your children, maybe your parents, and people like this. And you would like to get that relationship to a better footing where you guys can be loving and kind and gentle with each other. And what you're going to need to do is do work on your own mind. Oftentimes, we want other people to change. But in order for you to improve your relationships, you're going to need to change. You're going to need to improve the way your mind functions and start interacting with people in a more loving and kind way. You're going to need to practice generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And now that second category of relationships, you can work that out. But you got to work on your own mind first, so you start functioning in these relationships better and better for a long-term basis. It's not going to be one day or 1 week or even 1 month that you're going to transform your relationships. It's going to be a long-term basis. Then there's a third category of relationships that are brand new relationships, people you've never even met before. You don't even know their names right now. And you'll only ever be loving and kind in those relationships, and that's all you'll ever experience. So these are the three categories of relationships and how you essentially get your life to the point where you have all harmonious relationships in your life. You're going to need to let go of certain relationships and move on from those. You're going to need to improve your mind and improve your relationships with people you're committed to. That those relationships will flush out and you'll be able to work those out. But then there's that third category of brand new people that you'll only ever be loving and kind to. And now what you'll be left with several years from now is only relationships where you're loving and kind and warm and gentle. And that's the way people are going to be with you. So I've been practicing these teachings for many years. I don't have any negative relationships in my entire life. Everybody's loving and kind and warm and gentle, but I've been that way for many years. But it wasn't that way previously. When I wasn't practicing these teachings, I had a lot of bitterness and harshness and hostility in my own mind, and I was putting that out, and that's what was coming back to me. But when you transform your mind and you do the work on your mind, now you can transform your relationships. But it starts with you working on your own mind. So this is how you extinguish all your unwholesome karma. Now, when things are coming back to you that are unwholesome, you need to extinguish it through the eightfold path. You guys have questions on extinguishing your unwholesome karma? No questions? For those of you guys online, remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, so then one last thing on this natural law of Kamma, and then we'll take a break, is sometimes when I teach people about the natural law of Kamma and I explain that you can't run and hide from your karma, they say, hold on, David, wait a second. What about that person whose bloody footprint was at the murder scene? The bloody murder weapon was under their bed and they had blood all over their car and they went to court and they were found not guilty. Didn't they escape their karma? And the answer is no, they haven't escaped their karma. Instead, what they're experiencing is the results of human laws. Human laws or laws of society, they're imperfect. You can go to a court of law and be found not guilty when in reality you're guilty. And you can sometimes be found guilty when you're actually not guilty, because these are human beings that are administering this and they're imperfect. They're not able to administer these laws fairly and equally among all people. And we should always aspire for that to occur. But it's important to understand that whatever a punishment is in a human court, in a court of law, or laws of society, that's not 100% of your karma. That's only one aspect of your karma. There's still things that individuals are experiencing. Even if you go to court and you're found not guilty and you actually did murder this person, you're still experiencing unwholesome karma in your day-to-day life. It's just that you didn't go to jail for that particular offense. These are some of the things or some of the consequences that somebody would experience. They're going to experience a bad reputation in their community because the community is going to find out about this, the word's going to spread, and they're going to have to experience that bad reputation. They can experience sickness, disease, physical and mental pain, a shortened lifespan. The way that these things happen is that when you have stress and anxiety in your mind, it puts more stress on the physical organs of the body. And now you can experience sickness, disease, physical and mental pain, and you can experience a shortened lifespan. You can experience hostility, aggression, fights, and even being killed yourself. Because if you had enough craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind to kill somebody, it's not like all the rest of your relationships are perfect, right? You're still having difficulties in these other relationships. And now you're getting all this hostility and fights, and you can even have people kill you in these other relationships. You'll also experience a loss of wealth and income because you're going to need to go to court and defend yourself against a murder charge. That is not inexpensive. That's very expensive to do that. You're going to experience the loss of wealth in that situation. You'll have difficulties in relationships. Again, all your relationships aren't going wonderfully. If you had enough anger to murder somebody, all the other relationships are having struggles and difficulties too. You're going to have challenges securing and progressing in employment because people aren't going to feel comfortable hiring you if they know that you were in court for this murder charge and the news showing that your bloody footprint was at the murder scene, the bloody murder weapon was under your bed, and all these other things. People aren't going to be interested in hiring you. You'll have difficulty securing housing because who was interested in having a roommate that was accused of murder and went to court for murder? It would be very difficult to find housing. You're going to have challenges acquiring basic necessities to sustain life. This is all the results of your decisions. This is the unwholesome karma coming back to that individual. And then discontentedness and rebirth itself. Oftentimes when people murder, they have guilt and shame and fear in their mind, and they have to live with that for a certain period of time. And then, of course, rebirth itself. They can be reborn into other realms of existence. So these are all results of an individual's decisions to having murdered. Just because they were found not guilty in a court of law, they haven't escaped their karma at all. They're still experiencing all these results. It's just that you might not be there when these are occurring. So when you see somebody that is found not guilty and you firmly think that this person should be guilty, no need to get upset, no need to get frustrated. They're experiencing their karma. And in some situations, people go to court and they're actually not guilty and they're found guilty. For example, let's just say I was in a gang from 18 years old to like 25 years old, and I was selling drugs and I was murdering people and doing all these things, but I never got caught. And let's just say I got out of the gang when I was 25 years old. And now, as I'm distancing myself from the gang, maybe I'm 26, 27 years old. I haven't been involved with the gang whatsoever. But let's just say they go off and murder somebody, and somehow it gets pinned on me, right? And now I go to court. And I wasn't even there. I don't even associate with the gang anymore, but I was found guilty of this murder. Well, this is my karma because all these other murders and selling drugs that I did that I never got caught, now this one is getting pinned on me. And this is because of our karma. So an individual is going to experience their karma, either wholesome or unwholesome. You can't run and hide from it. You can't escape it, but you can extinguish it. So when it's coming back to you, when you're experiencing these kinds of things, it's important for you to extinguish it. So if your life partner or your parents or someone like this is yelling and hollering and screaming at you, if they're upset, hostile, and bitter, the last thing you're interested in doing is being hostile and bitter back, because that's just going to keep this thing going. It's just going to keep you guys running around in a circle where they're hostile and bitter and you're hostile and bitter and they're hostile and bitter and you're hostile and bitter. You would like to extinguish this by showing only loving kindness. And if you need to just walk away from the conversation, walk away. And if they get more angry when you walk away, that's helping you to see that you're making a wise decision, because they have so much attachment and they're having so much craving that when you walk away, they're getting even more angry. And that's showing you that it's unwise to continue to stay in that conversation. It's not the proper time to be speaking. So by you stepping away, it gives their mind time to calm down. You get to calm down. And now when you guys talk, you can do so with a calm mind. But when you're angry, if you're trying to have conversations, you're not going to experience wholesome results because you've got that anger in there that's going to produce argumentative speech. So it's better to just walk away from these conversations. Okay, so you guys have any questions on the natural law of Kamma? Okay. I don't see any questions online either. So it's 10:45. I think what we'll do is take a good 20-minute break, which will take us up to 5 minutes after 11. And then when we come back, I'm going to teach you what is merit. and I'm going to teach you how to get continued support on the path to enlightenment, and I'm going to teach you how to integrate the teachings of the Buddha into your day-to-day life. So if you guys would like to take a break, when we come back, I'll teach you those things. Okay? So we'll see you guys after break. Okay?